The evening sun draped a soft amber hue across the small town of Eldon Creek, where Marissa Lane was rinsing the last of the dinner plates. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel for your support means the world to me. Now back to my story. The house smelled faintly of lavender detergent and roasted thyme, her quiet ritual after another long day at the local accountant's office. Her son, Evan, had gone to a friend's house to study for his college entrance exams, leaving her in rare silence. Just as she turned off the tap, a knock echoed through the hallway, firm, deliberate, almost rehearsed. She frowned. No one ever visited unannounced in Eldon Creek. Wiping her hands on a towel, she walked to the door. A courier stood there, mid-30s, polite but detached, holding a thick brown envelope. Marissa Lane. Yes, that's me. Please sign here. She signed, took the envelope, and closed the door. The weight of the paper felt wrong, too heavy, too formal. Her heartbeat quickened. The envelope bore the seal of the Ravenshire District Court. She sank onto the sofa and tore it open. The first line blurred before her eyes. Statement of claim, division of jointly acquired property. Plaintiff, Adrian Lane. Her hands trembled. Adrian, her ex-husband. The man who had walked out 7 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a new lover. Marissa pressed a hand to her chest. The air grew thick. The words swam on the page. He was suing her for what she had built alone. She reread the lines. The apartment she bought after the divorce. The car she'd sold to pay for Evan's school. The inheritance from her late aunt. All listed as joint assets. Her throat tightened. He wanted half of her life. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang for evening prayer, but inside her heart, something shattered. She whispered into the silence. After all these years, why now? By the time Sophie arrived, the house in Eldon Creek had grown eerily quiet. The unopened envelope sat on the coffee table, beside a cold cup of tea. Marissa hadn't moved much since reading its contents. Just sat there, numb, her eyes tracing the same words over and over. Sophie didn't need to ask what was wrong. One look at her friend's pale face told her everything. She dropped her handbag on the floor and knelt beside her. Marissa, what happened? Wordlessly, Marissa handed her the papers. Sophie scanned them quickly, her brows furrowing deeper with every line. Then she slammed them down. That coward, she hissed. 7 years gone and now he wants this. Marissa exhaled shakily. He's claiming the apartment. Sophie and the car. He says they're joint property. But you bought this place after he left. You worked 2 jobs to get the down payment. I know, her voice broke, but there's no written agreement. He can say whatever he wants. Sophie sat back on her heels, thinking. He must be desperate, maybe he's broke. Or worse, someone's pushing him. Marissa's gaze drifted to the window, where dusk settled over the quiet street. Do you think he's sick? No, Sophie replied sharply. He's greedy. And you, my dear, are his easiest target. Marissa wiped her face with trembling hands. I don't want to fight, I just want peace. Sophie stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. Peace doesn't mean surrendering what's yours. You've rebuilt your life from nothing. Don't let him take that. Marissa nodded slowly. For years, she had imagined this moment. What she'd say if Adrian ever came back. None of those imagined confrontations involved a lawsuit. Sophie's voice softened. Tomorrow, we'll find a lawyer, a good one. Marissa looked up, her eyes finally steady. Yes, she said, tomorrow. But as she turned off the lights that night, she couldn't shake the thought that tomorrow might bring not justice. The letter arrived 2 weeks later, stamped with the official seal of High Court of Valmere. Marissa had known it was coming, but still, her hands trembled as she tore it open. The words, first hearing, division of joint assets, bled through her vision like fire. Sophie was beside her, sipping coffee, watching the color drain from her friend's face. It's official then. Marissa nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, he's actually doing it. They sat in silence for a long moment, the ticking clock echoing through the room. Finally, Sophie said, you'll need a strong lawyer. Someone who knows how to handle snakes. That's how they found Declan Hart, a calm, sharp-eyed attorney, whose quiet confidence made Marissa feel like she wasn't alone in this war. When he looked at the documents, his lips pressed into a thin line. This is tactical, Declan said. He's banking on emotional exhaustion. He expects you to settle. Marissa frowned. I won't, not this time. The first hearing came on a gray morning in late April. The sky hung heavy over Valmere City Courthouse, and Marissa's reflection in the glass doors looked like someone she barely recognized, tired but unbroken. Inside, the scent of paper and disinfectant filled the air. Her pulse thundered when she saw him, Adrian. The man who once swore he'd love her forever. Now he stood in a tailored suit, flanked by a young woman with crimson lips and diamond earrings. She clung to his arm, whispering something that made him smirk. Marissa's stomach twisted. 7 years vanished in a heartbeat. Declan leaned close. Don't speak unless asked to. Let me handle this. She nodded, staring straight ahead as the judge entered. When Adrian's lawyer began reading his claims, Marissa barely heard the words. Financial contribution, joint property, equitable division. But when Adrian's eyes met hers, she saw no remorse, only calculation. In that moment, she realized something chilling. He wasn't back because he needed money. He was back because he couldn't stand that she'd learned to live without him. And that made him far more dangerous than before. The air in the courtroom felt like it was made of ice. Every word echoed. I sat silently beside my lawyer, my hands trembling under the table. Across from me, Ava, my daughter, sat straight-backed, her face unreadable. Beside her was Lucas, her husband, whose eyes darted everywhere but toward me. Judge Morales entered, her robe swaying like a shadow. Court is now in session. My heart pounded as the case unfolded. Ava's lawyer spoke first, painting me as a manipulative woman who refused to respect boundaries and had financially interfered in her daughter's marriage. Each word cut deeper than the last. I stared at the table, wondering how love could twist so cruelly. When it was my turn, my lawyer called Lucas to the stand. He hesitated, just a second too long. That hesitation was everything. Mr. Turner, my lawyer said calmly, did you, or did you not, transfer $50,000 from your mother-in-law's account last March? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ava's face paled. Lucas's lips trembled. I was helping her manage her finances, he stammered. Helping, my lawyer pressed, or hiding it before buying a new car? Ava turned sharply toward him. What is she talking about, Lucas? Lucas's voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The silence that followed was unbearable. My daughter's eyes filled with tears as realization dawned. The betrayal had never been mine. For the first time in months, I looked up, meeting Ava's eyes. She tried to speak, but no words came. And in that moment, I didn't feel victorious. Just tired, so very tired. Still, the truth was finally out. And the storm had only just begun. The courtroom erupted after Lucas's confession. Reporters whispered, lawyers exchanged stunned glances, and Judge Morales banged her gavel repeatedly for silence. Ava sat frozen, her face pale as snow, eyes wide with disbelief. Order, order in the court, the judge shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. Lucas looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I didn't think she'd find out. He muttered, it was just a loan, I was going to pay it back. Ava turned on him, her voice shaking. You stole from my mother, from the woman who helped us buy our first home. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke. But Lucas didn't answer. His silence was enough. I sat still, my emotions tangled between heartbreak and relief. For months, I had carried the shame of being painted as a meddling, bitter woman when all along, I had been the victim. Yet, looking at my daughter's trembling shoulders, I felt no satisfaction, just sorrow. Judge Morales finally spoke, her tone heavy with disapproval. Mr. Turner, your actions have not only broken the law but have caused deep emotional harm. The court will take this into consideration. Lucas was escorted out by officers for further questioning. His head bowed. Ava buried her face in her hands. When the session ended, she approached me slowly. Mom, she whispered, her voice raw. I didn't know, I swear I didn't. For the first time in years, I saw the little girl I once raised, scared, confused and hurting. I reached out, resting a trembling hand on hers. I know, Ava, I know. We stood there in silence, surrounded by broken trust and courtroom echoes. Justice had been served, but forgiveness would take much longer. Week after the verdict, my house felt too quiet. The echo of the courtroom still lingered in my mind. Lucas's confession, Ava's sobs, the judge's final words. But beneath the quiet, there was peace. I had my dignity back. My name was cleared. Yet a strange emptiness followed me around like a shadow. One morning, while sorting through old paperwork, I found a sealed envelope tucked deep inside my desk drawer. My name was written on it, in my late husband's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Margaret, it began, if you're reading this, I want you to remember, our children may forget who they are, but it's your strength that will remind them. Tears blurred my vision. He'd written it years ago, before he passed. Somehow, it felt like he knew this day would come, a day when I'd be betrayed by the very ones we raised. As I folded the letter back, my phone buzzed. It was Ava. Mom, can we talk? Her voice was quiet, careful. We met later that afternoon at a small cafe in downtown Brookhaven. She looked tired, her once bright eyes clouded with regret. "I've left Lucas," she said softly. "He's under investigation for fraud. And I can't keep living like that. I want to fix things, Mom, if you'll let me." I studied her face for a long time. The bitterness I expected didn't come. Instead, I saw my daughter, broken, yes, but trying. "I've already forgiven you," I said gently. "But trust takes time." She nodded, tears falling onto her coffee cup. For the first time in years, we didn't argue. We just sat there, two women trying to rebuild the bridge love had nearly burned. The following weeks brought a calm I hadn't felt in years. Ava started visiting more often, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting quietly with me in the garden. She didn't ask for forgiveness anymore. She earned it with every act of kindness, every honest word. But peace never comes without echoes of the past. One morning, I received a call from the district attorney's office in Brookhaven. Lucas had been arrested, fraud, tax evasion, and misuse of company funds. The evidence Ava turned in had been the final piece they needed. When I hung up, I stared out my window for a long time. I should have felt vindicated, maybe even relieved. Instead, I whispered a prayer for him, not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry hatred any longer. That evening, Ava stopped by again. She stood at my door, holding a small box. "It's yours," she said, placing it in my hands. Inside was the bracelet I'd given her on her 18th birthday, the one she'd sold years ago during her first big argument with me. "I bought it back," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought you'd never want to see it again." I smiled faintly, slipping it onto my wrist. This bracelet was never about gold. I told her. It was about remembering who we are and where we come from. For the first time in a long while, Ava smiled. A real smile. We spent that night cooking dinner together, laughing softly, as though time itself had given us a second chance. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering Brookhaven in white, a quiet reminder that even after the harshest seasons, the world still knows how to start over. 3 months later, I was called back to court, not as a defendant this time, but as a witness. Lucas's trial had begun, and the city of Brookhaven buzzed with the news. He'd tried to shift blame onto others, including Ava, but the paper trail was undeniable. When I entered the courtroom, I noticed how different everything felt this time. The same wooden benches, the same judge, but this time, I wasn't the one being judged. I saw Ava sitting in the front row, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When our eyes met, she nodded once, silently telling me she was ready to face whatever came next. Lucas avoided looking at us. The man who once stood tall and proud now looked hollow, his arrogance replaced with fear. As I took the stand, I spoke calmly, clearly and truthfully. I told the court what I'd seen, what I'd endured, and how far manipulation had gone in tearing my family apart. When it was over, the judge thanked me for my testimony. Lucas was sentenced to several years in prison for financial crimes and perjury. Outside the courthouse, Ava approached me with tears in her eyes. "I can't believe it's finally over," she whispered. "It's not over," I said gently. "It's just a different kind of beginning." She hugged me then, the kind of embrace that doesn't erase pain but promises healing. The press snapped photos, questions flew, but I ignored them all. As we walked down the courthouse steps, the sun broke through the clouds. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel shame or bitterness. I felt peace, the kind that comes when truth finally takes its rightful place. Brookhaven had seen its share of trials, but this time, justice had spoken clearly. Life after the verdict felt strange, quiet, almost unfamiliar. For years, my days had been fueled by fear, anger, and uncertainty. Now, the silence of peace felt like something I had to relearn. I sold the apartment that held too many ghosts and bought a small house on the edge of town. It had an open garden, sunlight streaming through every window, and a sense of calm that wrapped around me like a warm shawl. Ava visited every weekend, helping me plant roses by the porch. She laughed more now, not the forced laughter of guilt, but the soft, genuine kind that comes from healing. One afternoon, as we sat drinking tea on the porch, she asked quietly, "Do you ever regret not fighting harder for him, for Dad?" I shook my head. "No, my love. You can't fight for someone who stopped fighting for themselves." Ava nodded, tears glistening but unshed. "I wish I had seen what you went through sooner." "You were trying to survive," I said. "We both were." There was forgiveness in that moment, not the loud, dramatic kind but something quieter, a release. Later that evening when she left, I stood by the window and watched her drive away. I thought about the years I had spent building walls, And how now, I was learning to build something else, roots. The night breeze carried the scent of lilac and fresh earth. I smiled to myself, realizing how full circle life had become. I had lost so much, yes, but what remained, peace, dignity, and my daughter's love, was worth far more than what was taken. Some storms don't destroy you. They reveal what was unbreakable all along. It was late spring when the knock came again. The same rhythm, slow, persistent, just like all those years ago. For a moment, my heart froze. I thought of the first envelope, the papers, the pain that followed. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a courier. It was him's Daniel. He looked older now, thinner. His once confident shoulders drooped, and his hands trembled slightly as he removed his cap. "Clara," he said softly, almost a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. For a long moment, I said nothing. The wind stirred between us, carrying the scent of the garden roses. "I'm not here for money," he added quickly. "I just wanted to see you, to say sorry properly this time." I studied him. The man who once shattered my world now stood before me, not as an enemy, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. The anger that had once burned in me was gone, replaced by something colder, distance, perhaps even pity. "I forgave you long ago," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean you belong here." He nodded slowly. "I understand." His eyes filled with something close to relief. "Thank you for that." He turned to leave, walking slowly down the gravel path. I watched until he disappeared from sight. Inside, the clock ticked softly. I felt no ache, no tears, just calm. I had spent years trying to make sense of what happened. But in that moment, I realized justice hadn't come from the courtroom, or even from revenge. It had come from survival. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold. And for the first time in years, I whispered to myself, I'm free. 2 years had passed since the final court hearing. The memories of those long, heavy days had begun to fade, replaced by quiet mornings, laughter, and a sense of peace Clara once thought she'd never feel again. Her son, Ethan, was now in university, studying architecture, the very dream he once whispered about when he was a boy. They spoke often, and every time he called, she felt that same pride swell in her chest. It wasn't the kind of pride that came from winning a legal battle, but from knowing she'd protected her child's future, even when the world tried to strip it away. The apartment that had once felt haunted now felt warm again. She'd repainted the walls, changed the curtains, filled the shelves with books and flowers. Every change was symbolic, a quiet reclaiming of what was hers. One evening, as she sat by the window sipping tea, her friend Sophie visited. "You look lighter," Sophie said, smiling, like someone who's finally set her burdens down. Clara nodded. "Maybe because I finally did. For years, I thought justice meant seeing Daniel pay for what he did. But real justice," she paused, "is living well after the storm." Sophie reached over and squeezed her hand. "You deserve that peace." Outside, the world was soft with twilight. A child's laughter echoed from the courtyard. A sound that once would have pierced her heart, now only made her smile. Clara stood and walked to the balcony, feeling the evening breeze brush against her face. Life hadn't gone the way she planned, but she had survived, rebuilt, and learned to breathe again. And as the first stars appeared above her, she whispered a promise to herself, "Never again will I let pain define me, only strength."